confirmed the next income support grant, which covers the period November to January, will now increase to 80% of average profits, up to £7,500.
Mr. Sunak's statement comes as England starts its second coronavirus lockdown today. The government's been criticised over new guidance on safe visits to care homes in England. Labour and a number of charities have described measures, including floor-to-ceiling screens, designated visitor pods and window visits, as impractical. Donald Trump has again called for the counting of votes in the US presidential election to stop. We'll hear from his campaign later, with the race itself still too close to call. He's made various claims about voter fraud and postal ballots. His opponent, Joe Biden, has a small lead in some of the key states critical in deciding the winner. American lawyer Carlos Moore isn't sure what Mr. Trump is trying to achieve.
There's really no point. It's just smoke and mirrors. He's trying to excite his base and trying to discredit the election. But we've had a safe and secure election, and it has been above board.
Nearly 1,400 jobs are going at Rolls-Royce, including in the UK. It's part of a bigger plan announced in May. People who've been scammed by fake PayPal emails have collectively lost nearly £8 million in just 9 months. Between January and September, 21,349 reports were made to Action Fraud. And Captain Sir Tom Moore wants to get people walking more and talking to each other as we spend extra time at home. The Fundraising Heroes charity has begun a fresh campaign. That's the latest. I'm Anna Bates.
This is Revive FM 94.0.
Reviving communities.
The views expressed on this program do not necessarily represent those of Revive FM or its management.
Hello, you're listening to Revive FM. My name is Henry Scott, and welcome to a special show on Revive FM, where we will be speaking to a brilliant professor of coronavirus who's been working on the Covidence study in participation with the Queen Mary. Can I please introduce Professor Adrian Martineau? Did I say that right?
You did, Henry. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, it's brilliant to have you. Listen, how are you doing?
Yeah, good. Thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, no, I mean, considering, second national lockdown, and I get to come into the studio on my own, and I'm pretty darn happy, I will say. Now, I want to jump straight into it because I've been doing my research on a bit about you and a bit about the study as well. But obviously, our listeners have no idea who you are. So if you want to give a little introduction to yourself, what you do, your specialty. I understand you're a lung doctor.
Yeah, that's right, Henry. I'm a lung doctor based at the Barts Medical School in Whitechapel. Mm-hmm. I still work in the hospital at Mile End Hospital, where I see TB patients. But most of my time I'm involved in research, and my research really focuses on different respiratory infections, and particularly at this time on COVID-19.
Wow, that's I was looking up the Covidence study when I found out I was going to be hosting the show, and I'm incredibly interested in it. So I know there's other studies going on. There's the one at Imperial, which is looking to find out the asymptomatic cases and the presence of coronavirus. But the Covidence study is more looking about treating and the effects of coronavirus. Is it?
Well, the Covidence study is actually, it's got several different aspects. So the first major aspect of the study is that we're looking at risk factors for disease. Now, people might think, well, we know what the risk factors are already. We know that if you're older, or if you're in a nursing home, if you're of Black or Asian ethnic origin, if you're overweight, then you're more at risk of COVID. And that's true to a certain extent, although some of our findings are counteracting those preconceptions. But what we don't know is, what is it about being overweight? What is it about being Black or Asian? What is it about being older that makes one susceptible to coronavirus? And that's what we're trying to get to the heart of with the Covidence UK study. But in addition to this, what I call risk factor research, we're doing a whole raft of other things to look at, for example, the impact that COVID-19 has had, not just on people's physical health long term, but on mental health as well. And, with coming into this new lockdown as well, it's really important not to underestimate or underemphasize the impacts, not just of the illness, but of our response to it as well, and how we're coping with that.
I mean, I found out that I got coronavirus in July, and I would say, while I would say the most that happened is I lost my sense of smell, but other than that, there was sort of nothing really odd about it. But I did find afterwards is that it was very difficult to sort of enjoy eating food because it was just bland. It was just, there was nothing to it. So and yeah, there's been other adverse effects I've found myself. So, you know, if anyone listening has had coronavirus, I'm certainly going to sign up and participate in the Covidence study after this anyway. But I want to ask you a quick question about that point you made about why if you are overweight, then you're adversely affected. Why, if you're Black or Asian or part of the BAME community, you're adversely affected by coronavirus. Are you able to share any of the initial findings, sort of the linking those reasons?
Sure. So I think we can split it up into two bits. The first thing is to find out, are those risk factors for severity, or are they risk factors for getting the illness in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
So when COVID-19 first came on the scene, the way that we got our handle on what the risk factors were we looked at the people who were rolling up to hospital, and we looked at the people who weren't, and we compared their characteristics. And that was when we saw that it was the people with diabetes, with high blood pressure, people Black and Asian, ethnic origin, overweight people seemed to be doing worst. What we've been able to do with the Covidence study is to actually dissect out the question of what's a risk factor for severe COVID-19 from the question of what's a risk factor for getting COVID-19 in the first place. And they do actually seem to be quite different things. So those risk factors that I've mentioned are indeed the risk factors for severe disease, but they don't necessarily align with the risk factors for getting it in the first place. So take age, for example. We know that if you're older, 70 plus, your risk of dying from COVID is much higher than if you're in your 20s or 30s. However, what we found out in this study, and what's been borne out by other studies that have been doing antibody testing, like the Imperial study, but we kind of got there fairly early on, is that actually if you're younger, you're more at risk of catching COVID than if you're older. And that's not likely to represent any weakness of the immune system in younger versus older people. It pretty much represents behavior in that older people tend to have been more cautious about it because they're more worried, whereas younger people have been going out to work, going on the tube, they're more likely to be exposed. But I think what it does illustrate is that there's a difference between the risk factors for getting it versus the risk factors for getting it badly.
Okay, right. So that's something I was about to ask. So for young people, it's not about their immune systems or the viral load in which they are required to take in order to get it. It's more about the behavior of young people. So lots of young people at university mixing in large social groups and gatherings, well, perhaps sometimes illegally. And that's purely behavioral. There's not anything to suggest that possibly it could be that young people are slightly more susceptible to getting it.
No, I don't think so. What we can do, again, with the data that we've got from Covidence, we can adjust for all sorts of factors, explanatory factors like that. And what we see is that essentially what it boils down to, whether or not you get COVID, depends on how likely you are to be exposed to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as a virus, it's super infectious. So pretty much if you're at high risk of getting exposed, then you're at high risk of getting it in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Where there's a big question is, why do some people seem to get prolonged symptoms? So I was glad to hear that when you experienced COVID-19, you had relatively mild symptoms, and although they persisted for a little bit, they haven't been debilitating in the long term.
No.
What we're seeing, though, is that for certain groups of people, they are having symptoms which are lasting over 4 weeks. That's what we call long COVID.
Mm-hmm.
And they're having symptoms which are really making them feel completely washed out and tired, and really sort of impairing their quality of life, their ability to work in the long term. And what we're able to do with Covidence is to try and identify the factors that then make people more susceptible to this so-called long COVID or prolonged symptoms.
Mm-hmm. So, for example, something which a question that I have, because I've been hearing a lot about long COVID, because my politics teacher, who recently resigned due to her fear of coronavirus and traveling in and out of school every day, firstly, she lived with vulnerable people, so it was becoming unsafe for her to travel in and out without putting them at risk. But also she was worried about herself getting long COVID. It was quite terrifying for her. So what I want to know is what is the difference between perhaps post-viral fatigue and long COVID? Because I've suffered from post-viral fatigue, and I know what you mean. It completely wipes you out. So what's the difference there?
Well, that's pretty controversial, and it's partly because the definitions of post-viral fatigue are a bit woolly. They're not entirely crisp and well worked out. It's not something like a pneumonia or tuberculosis where you can sort of identify the bug and say, hand on heart, this is what you've got, and if you don't have it, then you don't have it. There is an overlap, most definitely, between post-viral fatigue and long COVID. They have a lot of things in common, and fatigue is like a really key one. However, there are some features of long COVID that aren't particularly, it doesn't have particularly in common with post-viral fatigue. And one of those is these rather peculiar sensations of breathlessness that people are getting. When I say they're peculiar, it's not the sort of breathlessness that you experience, for example, if you go running or exert yourself. It's rather a sensation of breathlessness that you can get even when you're sitting at rest. And that seems to be something that's unique to long COVID, that's not classically experienced by people with post-viral fatigue following other viral infections. So I think the bottom line is there's an overlap, but they are definitely not the same, one and the same thing entirely.
Okay, so when we're thinking about long COVID, I've also been reading a lot that some people have real issue focusing and stuff. And is that because coronavirus not only attacks the lungs as a respiratory illness, but does it also attack the brain?
Well, the fact that one of the best known symptoms of COVID-19 is losing your sense of smell and taste is early evidence that coronavirus does have an effect on your central nervous system as well as the lungs and other body systems. You may know that your ability to smell depends on the action of two little nerves that sit right at the top of where your nose joins your brain. And it's thought that the virus can actually affect the functioning of these nerves, and that's why you have problems with smell and taste. In fact, when you lose your sense of taste, that's actually reflects loss of sense of smell. So it's the loss of sense of smell that's the primary thing. So that is evidence that the virus can affect the nervous system, but it can also affect other systems in the body, in particular the blood clotting system, particularly in people who are seriously ill, as well, of course, as the lungs. So it's a virus we're learning more and more about. And I think one of the important things to know, that to realize is that in order to find out what the virus is, we need to be able to follow people up for long periods of time, months, even years afterwards, to get a firm handle on whether or not the virus is having long-term effects on people's health. And that's one of the things which Covidence is able to do.
Statistically speaking, so far, out of all the participants and volunteers in the study, what are the kind of percentage rates of those who experience long COVID going at the minute?
So within our study, around 1 in 10 people have had COVID-19, and of those, around 1 in 10 will report long-term symptoms of COVID. So it's a rule of 10%.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the incidence is, a lot. The thing is, a lot of people go only 10%, only 1%. But obviously, when we scale up those numbers, it becomes quite a large and a spooky number, I would say, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, after the first wave in the spring, around 10 to 15% of Londoners had antibodies to SARS-CoV-2, the virus which causes COVID-19. So if you then take a tenth of that, that's 1.5 to 2% of all Londoners. If there are 10 million people in London, well, you can do the maths. It's a lot of people.
Exactly. So I was just wondering, right? And obviously, I personally don't think this is true, but there's been lots of stuff going on in the media at the minute about, and Donald Trump especially has been incredibly vocal of this. We're crossing our fingers for Nevada or Pennsylvania later as well. Is that Donald Trump has been saying, the Chinese manufactured virus, it came from a lab and stuff. In your sort of, I may be speaking beyond your remit of what you study, but is there any chance that a virus like this was manufactured in a lab, perhaps by mistake, or there was editing or some kind, or is it just a naturally occurring virus and this is something that could almost happen again by pure chance? Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I do apologize, but I do believe we've lost Adrian. Yeah, I mean, that is something we're just going to wait for him to come back. But in the meantime, I'm just going to quickly take us through some examples of coronavirus, want to remind you of the main symptoms, which are loss of smell, persistent cough, persistent dry cough, or a fever. And fever tends to be the most common study. Now, just giving you some more background on the Covidence study here, it's been developed in response to the coronavirus pandemic. Yeah, sadly, we've lost Adrian. Hopefully, he will return soon. But the coronavirus study was started in response to the pandemic, and essentially what we found from there has been, this. I'm looking at some of the data from this study now. It's incredibly interesting. Now, coronavirus mortality rate apparently has a 99.7% survival rate, and lots of people say, "Oh, why are we locking down? That's silly. That's silly." But I mean, I just do have to say is that 0.3% of the UK population is, I believe, 300,000 people. That's a huge number of loss of lives, and let's not forget that if that all happened at once, then obviously the mortality rate would go up significantly due to lack of hospital beds, and also the mortality rate for people just who needing regular treatment would not happen as well. Okay. We've got a comment, and I'm hoping we'll get Adrian back in a second, as Adrian is currently still not with us. So we've got a comment from Imran Mohammed. He says, we've got a phone call. I believe that's gone through. Okay, right. Yeah, sorry about that. Luckily, we've got the professor back. Adrian, there you are. Let's just get you back on the screen, shall we? There we go. Sorry to lose you there, Adrian.
Sorry about that. You're asking me about whether or not the virus had been purposefully engineered?
Yeah, it's a question that's sort of been lulling around the place, and especially in Donald Trump's mind, is that, this is the Chinese virus manufactured in a lab. But obviously, the reason we don't call it the Chinese virus, and like we call the Spanish flu, is about 100 years difference of progress and that kind of stuff. But is there any possibility that is there any evidence to suggest that?
I guess it's technically possible, but I would really hesitate to go down that road. We know that coronaviruses have animal hosts in wild animals, and they can hop from non-human species to humans. So there's really no reason to think that wasn't what happened here. And the fact that the outbreak is thought to have originated in a so-called wet market, so a market where live wild animals are kept in close proximity to humans, underlines the likelihood of that being the original source of the virus.
Right. Okay. So when you say it can transfer between humans and animals, I read a headline this morning saying that something like 19 million mink in the Netherlands are about to be culled because they found a mutated strain of coronavirus. So is that the kind of risk that we experience is that it goes to animals and possibly mutates into what would be a more deadly strain of coronavirus?
Yes, I mean, this is really how a lot of pandemic viruses originate. So particularly in Southeast Asia, where livestock and humans are living in very close proximity, that's, if you like, a sort of perfect petri dish for the emergence of these new pathogens that can hop across species barriers and then cause real trouble. And that's where I'm sure SARS-CoV-2 is not going to be the last of these. That's where one would expect new influenza viruses, for example, to arise with transmission from chickens to humans. Brilliant. So I'm afraid that is part and parcel of the very close relationship between livestock and humans in that particular part of the world.
So without getting into any controversial debate, because I'm a flexitarian, doing my bit for the environment, it's not out of sort of an animal cruelty issue, but a lot of vegetarians, vegans say that our reliance on livestock and stuff perhaps increases the chances of pandemics in the future. Does that have any merit to it?
Well, I think certainly the emergence of these pathogens is linked to the proximity of domestic animals with humans, and most of those animals are being bred to be eaten. So, one can follow that line of thought.
Brilliant. Listen, Adrian, we're going to go to a short break. Everyone, do stay tuned. As Adrian Martineau will be back with me after the break, and do feel free to call in on 0333 444 0940 if you have any questions about coronavirus, or if you're on our Facebook Live, which I see there are quite a few of you today. Please do not forget to comment, and we will answer your questions accordingly. Thank you very much. Do stay tuned, as we'll be right back after this.
As winter approaches, here's a critical reminder of coronavirus symptoms from Dr. Gupta.
The main symptoms of coronavirus are a high temperature or a new continuous cough, or a sudden loss or change in your sense of smell or taste. If you have any of these, to protect yourself and others, it is critical you isolate at home, even if you don't feel too bad. And you must book a test immediately. Use the NHS COVID-19 app or go to gov.uk/coronavirus.
Stay alert, control the virus, save lives.
Turkish Kitchen, the best Turkish food you'll ever taste. We only use the highest quality meat. Along with our mixed grill platters, we serve cold mezes, hot mezes, lahmacun, and a wide selection of fish options. To order for delivery or collection, call us now on 0208 507 8822. That's 0208 507 8822. Or visit us at 41 Ripple Road, Barking, IG11 7NT. We can also take group bookings and take care of all your party needs. The Turkish Kitchen, Barking.
We're facing the biggest health challenge of our generation, and we've shown that together we're stronger than ever. But to keep making a difference, we need to support each other. If you're a man and you've had coronavirus recently, then you might just have the antibodies to help save lives in your blood plasma. That's why we urgently need men to donate. Giving blood plasma is safe and easy. Be the difference. Search Donate Plasma or call 0300 123 2323 today.
ये आयशा है। ये बहुत छोटी सी थी जब इसके वालिद का एक हादसे में इंतकाल हो गया। वो अपनी माँ और छोटे बहन भाइयों के साथ रहती है। आयशा जैसी लाखों बच्चियां जिंदगी की बुनियादी सहूलतों से बिल्कुल महरूम है। यही वजह है कि वो स्कूल भी नहीं जा सकती। मिनहाज वेलफेयर फाउंडेशन ने आपकी एहतियात और अपनी खिदमत दुनिया भर के यतीम और बेसहारा बच्चों के लिए वक्फ कर दी है। एक यतीम और बेसहारा बच्चे का सहारा बनिए। आज ही अतिया कीजिए।
अभी कॉल मिला 0300 3030 या हमारी वेबसाइट विजिट करें www.minhajwelfare.org.
Nikah, talaq, counseling on matrimonial disputes, Islamic wills, Islamic law of inheritance, or an Islamic verdict on any other issue. The Muslim Sharia Council is at your service. We provide official certification, and our experienced and highly qualified imams are available to provide you with guidance when needed. MQI London is based at 292 to 296 Romford Road, Forest Gate. We are open from Monday to Friday, 2 to 4 p.m. Or alternatively, call us now on 0208 257 1786.
The new NHS COVID-19 app shows me my risk of coronavirus and helps me protect my mum.
It lets me know fast if I've been in contact with other app users who have coronavirus, so I can quickly warn Dan.
It shows me the risk level in my area immediately, so I can tell Sue.
It helps me protect all my loved ones, like Kim and Chris.
The more of us who get the app,
the better we can control coronavirus.
Protect your loved ones.
Get the NHS COVID-19 app.
Download now at Google Play or the App Store.
Amigos, the signature name when it comes to burgers and shakes. Our succulent burgers are prepared in front of you while you wait. Whether you go for our 6-ounce Mexican or our 10-ounce Texan, or you decide to go for our messy fries or our buffalo wings, one thing you're guaranteed is quality. Dine in with your friends and family at 400 Cranbrook Road, Gants Hill, or order in on Uber Eats, Just Eat or Deliveroo. Amigos, hats off to great burgers.
Revive FM 94.0 on the radio,
on your mobile,
and online.
Hello and welcome back to Revive FM. My name is Henry Scott and I'm here today in the sort of quasi non-virtual / virtual studio with the wonderful Professor Adrian Martineau. How are you? Adrian is from the Queen Mary University, who's been working upon the Covidence study, which is an incredible study which has been looking at the outbreak of coronavirus and how it affects the body. Bear in mind, we are on a Facebook Live, and we also have a studio number, which is 0333 444 0940. Please do call in if you have any questions. this is going to be quite short as Adrian has to sadly leave us soon, but we've just got I've got a few questions for him before he leaves us today. So you mentioned blood clotting. Do you understand perhaps how this occurs, and what with the blood clotting? Why is that a crucial symptom, and what does that cause?
So the phenomenon whereby patients with COVID-19 get problems with blood clotting is really only seen in the very most severe cases. It's something called DIC, or disseminated intravascular coagulation, that we see in patients who are acutely sick from a number of causes. It's not something that occurs early in the disease, or that would really happen outside of hospital. So it's one of the more extreme manifestations.
Okay. And I've got two more questions, to be honest, before we bid our farewell, which is a real shame because it's been lovely talking to you, by the way. Is that, in your opinion, with new treatments and stuff, and also perhaps an improved track and trace system, when a vaccine is released, in the spring, or they said that people have been mentioning stuff about next month, is it likely that we in the UK will eradicate coronavirus, or due to the fact that antibodies they're seeing lower to quite low levels after 5 months, that this is something we will simply have to live with?
I think eradication is quite unlikely now that the virus is pretty firmly established in the population. I predict that coronavirus is going to end up being a bit like flu in several respects. First of all, because we need an annual flu vaccine, because our immunity to flu viruses isn't that long lasting. And secondly, it's probably going to be something that comes up in the winter and goes away in the summer. A couple of factors that make me think that. We know that immunity is not that long lasting. We know from our experience with flu that people age 70 plus perhaps don't respond as well to vaccines as younger people. And we also know that some people aren't going to have the vaccine because they don't like vaccines. I think that's unfortunate. I think vaccines are great. I'm a big fan, but we have to be realistic and acknowledge that there's going to be a lot of skepticism about the vaccine, and that a proportion of the population aren't going to have it. And we have to build that into our models, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. So when it comes to COVID-19, obviously creating a vaccine, you're having to create it for, I assume multiple strains of this virus, because it does evolve, doesn't it?
Yeah, there are mutations, but they're not necessarily in the protein which the vaccine is directed against. Mm-hmm. With flu vaccine, we do. Well, I say the World Health Organization does actually change the strains that are in the vaccine according to whatever was circulating in the Southern Hemisphere during the previous 6 months. So I imagine that a similar sort of thing will happen with COVID-19. But, we're in uncharted territory here, so there's an extent to which we're going to have to just wait and see.
Brilliant. Well, Adrian, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great to talk with you. I'm glad. I hope you've been very informative to me, at least, and also to hopefully many of our listeners. The show will be repeated throughout this week. So if you've missed it and you want to hear more, it's on Facebook Live and YouTube. But Adrian, thank you very much, and I wish you a brilliant day.
Thanks, Henry. If I could just add, the research can still be joined. We're looking for anybody aged 16 plus to sign up. Just visit qmul.ac.uk/Covidence.
Brilliant. I will share a link in our live stream for everyone, and I will certainly be participating. So thank you very, very much again. This was Henry Scott with Adrian Martineau, and I'll be staying with you for the rest of the hour to talk about current affairs. But Adrian, thank you very much.
Thanks, Henry.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, everyone, that was Adrian Martineau from the Covidence Study at Queen Mary University. Was certainly very, very interesting, some of the findings we got from there. And it sadly, according to him, it possibly means that we could be living with COVID-19 for longer than we intend. To me, that is a real shame, because I possibly am going to live for another 60 years, hopefully, if I don't get coronavirus and sadly pass away from it at a random time, or World War III breaks out from, the US election or whatever. But it's time to talk about the US election. Now, yesterday, me and Tom were speaking about me and Tom Hutchinson, my wonderful co-host, who's actually on later today at 6 p.m. You should really tune in. That's going to be a discussion about whether schools should remain open or not during this lockdown. I'm personally of the mindset that if we want to make this short, sharp, and we want to get the case numbers as low as possible, it's got to be a repeat of March and perhaps close them for 2 weeks. But that remains to be seen with Tom Hutchinson and members of Redbridge for Education and Teaching Union. So that's a really, really cool discussion. I encourage many of you to tune in. Nonetheless, it's time to speak a little bit about the US election before I sign off for the hour. Wow. Oh my goodness. I've been poring over election data since November, and since the vote is counted, Joe Biden is now only 6 electoral votes away from securing the presidency, which is probably the most exciting news I've had in a while, as I will not lie, I'm not a fan of Donald Trump. I believe he sows discourse, he's divisive, he stands up for white supremacists, and I think it's frankly disgusting behavior. And I think what's more tragic is that 66 million people voted for Donald Trump, 67 million. And I'm not one to judge people for voting for Donald Trump, but hopefully in the next week or so, we're going to have a US citizen who's actually a Trump supporter come on into the studio, or at least come on online, and that should be a really interesting discussion. And I can't wait to speak with him and show that interview live on here. Now, just a quick thing, Joe Biden has won 264 electoral votes. The results of the Georgia state election for President Donald Trump or Joe Biden as a president are expected today at some point. Now, it is likely that Donald Trump will win Georgia, as it's traditionally a Republican state. Same with North Carolina, which is expected which results are expected as late as November 12th, which is incredible. However, Pennsylvania and Nevada. Pennsylvania is a swing state. It never traditionally votes one way or the other. Now, Joe Biden has been polling 4.9% higher than Donald Trump, and Obama won the state in 2012. So assuming that Biden being a far less divisive character than Hillary Clinton was, we can securely say that Joe Biden has a 2/5 chance of winning this election. 4/5 is a 4/5 chance of winning this election. I believe Joe Biden's going to win it. I don't believe Trump's going to win it. I think Trump made a slight remark about an acceptance speech the other day. So it's something to watch for, everyone. And I would seriously recommend tuning in to the results as they come in live. But it's going to be certainly close, and the counts are being waited on. You've got voters breaking into counting centers. Counting centers are being boarded up. It's incredibly, incredibly interesting. So I would say that's something to definitely watch for. But that's enough from me for the time being. I've been Henry Scott. This has been the interview with Professor Adrian Martineau on the Covidence Study UK, which I suggest everyone please do sign up for. You can find it on Covidence, Queen Mary University. It's brilliant that we have access on ReviveFM to such brilliant minds, and also thanks to you to the Queen Mary University and Adrian for tuning in today. I've been Henry Scott, and do stay safe out there. Please stay at home, wash your hands, face, space, remain alt, and stay happy, because remember, it's lockdown and we are being denied of our social interaction. So I really encourage you to tune in. Can I please recommend that if you are struggling with the lockdown, me and Tom Hutchinson will be here every Tuesday from 5 to 7 p.m. on Drive Time, and Revive FM will be talking you through the lockdown every single day, all the time, because we're always on the air. And I hope that everyone's staying safe out there and keeping warm, because it's a really cold day today, isn't it? Listen, I've been Henry Scott, and please do stay tuned, as there'll be other shows after this.
ये आयशा है। ये बहुत छोटी सी थी जब इसके वालिद का एक हादसे में इंतकाल हो गया। वो अपनी माँ और छोटे बहन भाइयों के साथ रहती